Hey everybody, it's Dr. May. How are my radically open DBT fans doing out there? All right, I hope you guys are good. I got a new one for you today. This is lesson 20. All right, this is something that I think we all could relate to one degree or another, enhancing social connectedness, right? A lot of times we could get better and better at this. We might be currently happy with how we are socially, but chances are we like to, work on it, right? And find ways to make it even better. So this video is going to go over some tips for that, okay? We don't have an acronym today, but I'm sure you'll find some stuff in here anyway. All right, so this is a really interesting concept that we're going to talk about first, okay? So while we're thinking about social connection, it's important for us to find people that are kind of compatible with our level of desired intimacy, okay? So as you know, we're human beings who are tribal creatures, right? We live in groups, we help each other, and we literally need other people to survive. So we're wired to be connected, okay? However, people really vary in the degree to which they desire connection and closeness, okay? Some people have a very high need for closeness. They need a lot of companionship, a lot of time with other people. Sometimes they hate being alone. They always have someone around. They need a lot of socializing. They need a lot of talking, a lot of communicating, a lot of validating, and their need just happens to be really high, okay? Other people are more content having more distance, right? They're okay with being alone a little bit more. Maybe they want more casual relationships, or maybe just one really close relationship and the rest, aren't particularly important for all the time anyway. Maybe they do some things together, but do a lot of things alone. And that's okay too. Okay. So the idea is that just because it's different, it doesn't mean it's wrong, right? Everybody has their own natural set point for what's comfortable for them and their own natural range for the amount of intimacy that they're comfortable having. Okay. There's a lower end and a higher end, as we'll talk about later. So this is the first thing we need to be aware of in ourselves and in other people, so that when we try to form connections, we find people that are compatible with our levels of desired intimacy, and us with theirs, okay? Because the thing is, a lot of differences in relationships with levels of intimacy could cause issues, okay? You might have heard of a pattern in a couple relationship called a pursuer-distancer pattern, right? Where one person has a high need for closeness, and they're pursuing greater closeness from the other person, more than that person's able to give. And the other person feels overwhelmed by that person and smothered. And so they pull away and become more and more distant because they don't have a really high need for closeness. They need more space. And when people try to crowd their space, they feel very uncomfortable, okay? So this dynamic can create a problem in relationships when there's too much separation between intimacy needs, or a lack of respect for the differences and trying to make one or another right or wrong, okay? So the person who's more distant might say the person who wants more intimacy is wrong because you're too needy, you're too dependent, you're too smothering, right? And then the person who wants more closeness and isn't getting it from the other person might say, well, you're cold, you're too distant, you're too icy, you're too frigid, whatever, right? But that's judgmental. And the idea is that it's not right or wrong, it's just different, okay? So differences are okay, right? And we need to kind of understand and appreciate each other's differences in intimacy needs because they are going to be there, all right? So therefore, you should use these when we form our relationships. Okay, another thing is, if you're somebody who needs more space, or sometimes people who are over controlled tend to be on the end of people who need a little bit more independence, a little more distance from people, and don't like to be smothered. So dependency feels like a dirty word. It feels like, oh, I don't want to be dependent. That's not good, right? When I tried to be dependent earlier on, I only got hurt by people. It's too much trouble. It's too much drama, right? And the thing is, though, some degree of dependency is okay. We all need to be dependent on other people in one way or another, right? So even think about just the way we operate in society, right? Look at the pictures here. Along the way, we've needed teachers, right? People to teach us what we needed to learn in life in order for us to grow up and have a life as an adult that's meaningful. We need people working in stores, right? to help sell us things. We need the manufacturers to make stuff that the products that we buy. We need delivery people to deliver them, right? We need farmers to grow our food. And we need family to raise us and for companionship, right? So all those forms of dependency are things that we all have, and they're all okay, all right? So we don't have to make dependency a dirty word. We just have to respect what our current intimacy needs are, okay? All right, so this is a really cool diagram. Well, I think it's really cool. I hope you guys like it too. So this is, I kind of recreated it from the Radically Open DBT skills book, okay? And they call this the Intimacy Thermometer, all right? Just to kind of illustrate how we are compatible or not with other people. So just in our little legend over here. So the red part is the maximum level of intimacy that each of these people are comfortable tolerating. And the light blue part is the minimum level of intimacy these people are comfortable tolerating. So below the minimum level, you might feel deprived or really lonely or isolated or alienated. And beyond the maximum level, you might feel overwhelmed and smothered, okay? So ideally with the X, you're looking for something in between, and that's your comfortable set point of the average amount of intimacy that you're used to having, okay? And then the overlap is the green circles. So let's look at Jill and Jack, okay? The first person on the left and then the guy in the middle. So let's say they're in a relationship. This is actually something that might work out well for them because there's a lot of intimacy overlap, okay? Jill's range is a little bit higher than Jack's, but there's a decent amount that kind of is overlapping, so that's good. So, and both of their set points are in that overlap. So their average amount of intimacy, you know, is there, and they're probably able to provide it for each other, and that might feel very comfortable, right? Sometimes Jack might need a little less, you know, and sometimes Jill might need a little more, but generally speaking, they have a decent amount of overlap, and that probably has some good potential there. Okay, so let's pretend that Jill's not in this picture anymore, and it's just Jack and Julie on the right. So if you look at Julie, her maximum intimacy level is quite a bit lower than Jack's, okay? In fact, it's even lower than his set point. And her minimum level is below his minimum level. So their intimacy overlap is much smaller, okay? So in fact, Jack has to really like tolerate the minimum that he's comfortable with just to be a little compatible with Julie, okay? So her set point is even close to where his minimum is. So she's comfortable where he's least comfortable, right? So she's probably most likely to feel overwhelmed by Jack because he probably wants more connection than she can tolerate. And he's probably likely to often feel a little deprived, you know, like, because she often wants the least amount that he can tolerate. So that relationship may not work as well, right? She might experience Jack as very needy and demanding, and he might experience Julie as a little cold and distant, right? So we got to think about how this plays out in our own relationships, right? And how we could choose more wisely. Okay, next. All right, other ways about improving our social relationships and contacts is understanding about friendships, all right? And sometimes in our culture, especially Western culture, like in the US, and especially when you're younger, like in high school and college, it seems like the thing to do to have a big friendship group, right? To be part of a clique or be part of, or have like 600 friends on Facebook or 1,000 friends on Facebook, and you're supposed to have friends, right? And when you feel like you don't have enough, you may feel lonely because you're not measuring up to that standard. However, they found that in looking at people, you only really need like one or a couple of people that you're close to in order to reap the important, healthy psychological benefits of the relationship. And probably also physical benefits, because when we feel connected, our physiology works a lot better as well, okay? So in essence, we have to remember that it's quality, not quantity. We don't need a ton of people if we don't want it. But if we have quality in the few people we have, then that's perfect, okay? All right, so I know a lot of folks out there might have had some troubles with relationships throughout their life, right? You may not have ever had a really good model of a good parent or a good friend or a good connection, and you've been in a lot of unhealthy situations. So it might be hard to imagine, like, what does a healthy friendship or connection look like? What are the characteristics I should be looking for in my relationships? What should I be expecting to get? And what should I be expecting to offer? Okay. So in the next few slides, we're going to talk about characteristics of a genuine friendship, right? So if we want to build these couple of really meaningful relationships, they should try to have these qualities if possible. All right. So let's look at the first one. All right. So the first thing is that friends should really just enjoy each other's company, right? Genuinely like each other and like being around each other. And when you're not around each other, you miss each other, right? And when you're around each other, you feel comfortable, you feel safe, you feel like I could just let my hair down and be myself, right? You could drop your guard and relax. You don't have to put on a front with this person, you know? And if the situation calls for it, you could be a little emotionally uninhibited. You could have fun, you could let loose a little bit, you could be silly, and you could just be your full range of self. Okay, friends could even have a good sense of humor. They could playfully tease each other and not take it the wrong way, right? And just find each other easy to be around. Okay, so that's really one of the main starting points for a friendship. All right, another thing, if you watched my last video, it was about validation. So a good friend offers and accepts validation, right? Friends are accepting of each other as they are, with their flaws and all, right? They're not expecting perfection. You're not treating your friend like a project, like someone you have to sculpt and change in order for them to be okay. And you don't feel like you have to go out of your way to change yourself in order to be accepted by them, right? So true friends really are able to listen to each other, accept differences, and make that be okay. And there's a sense of equality. Like we're different, but we're still human beings and we respect each other. Okay. Also, important quality is loyalty, right? When you have someone who's close to you, you're loyal to them and the relationship. It's important to you. You prioritize that over maybe even achievement or winning. You'd rather have that relationship intact than to like damage your relationship, but while possibly getting what you want. Okay. You kind of honor and trust each other. You trust that you'll do the right thing, that you'll respect each other's best interests. You'll protect each other. You won't abandon the person when the going gets tough. If you have a problem, you'll expect that the other person will be there for you and vice versa. And good friends are willing to make self-sacrifices for each other without expecting anything in return, to really just be there for each other and maybe go out of your way for each other when needed, just because, you really care about the person, right? And you're not keeping tabs of, well, I did this and she did that or he did that, right? All right, another important quality, as you probably can guess, is honesty, right? We talked about being radically open and genuine and honest and, revealing our true self, through radically open DBT and not putting on fronts or being phony, right? So true friends are honest with each other, right? What's on the inside matches what's on the outside. And if you have a problem or there's something going on, you're able to express it and the other person's able to receive it, right? So the person will trust that if I say, I think something's wrong or I'm hurt by something, that I still value the relationship. I could give feedback without thinking I'm going to destroy the person. And I could receive feedback without thinking that the person's going to abandon me, right? So there's a trust that the relationship will stay intact, even if we disagree about something or we, had an issue, okay? So we give each other the gift of truth with kindness. I love that phrase, right? So we're not going to be truthful and nasty. We're going to be truthful and kind. We're telling the truth in order to help the person. Okay. And inevitably, most of the time in relationships at one point or another, or maybe a little bit more often, the conflicts come up, right? We have a disagreement about something or we accidentally hurt each other's feelings. But if there is a conflict, we trust that we're going to fight fair, okay? That even if we're a little heated, that we're still going to respect each other despite the conflict, and we're going to try really hard to work it through. And that I'm not going to be nasty. I'm not going to be judgmental. I'm not going to blame. I'm going to try to own up to my side of the street, so to speak. We're going to try to work together to solve whatever the problem is. and I'm going to assume the best rather than the worst about the person because I know who this is, right? Yeah, and so admitting when we're wrong, apologizing if necessary, right? So all those things help the conflict get worked through. And it actually could strengthen a relationship when you survive a conflict, and it could clear the air and help improve the intimacy and improve the connection. So although we're often afraid of conflict because it's very unpleasant, if you're having a conflict with somebody you trust and you trust each other to do it in a kind way, respectful way, it becomes less scary and it becomes just part of the fabric of the relationship. Okay, so here's another thing that we have to think about, right? So sometimes one of the obstacles for us in building relationships is having been burned in the past, right? So if you have a history of being hurt by people or betrayed by people or abused by people, it might be like you might have a stance of mistrust because of your history, right? And we could totally understand that. And so it's important for us to really examine where the mistrust is coming from and whether there's anything we did that contributed to our perception of the person as being mistrustful, right? Because I am the one who decided that I don't trust somebody, right? And sometimes, you know, if I rethought the situation, I would see that person differently and maybe I'd be less hurt or I could work through a conflict. So it's important for us to do a little self-inquiry about this, all right? So here's some sample self-inquiry questions you could ask yourself if you find yourself having difficulty trusting somebody, okay? And these are not the full extent of the questions. You might have other ones to ask yourself as well. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot about this slide. Right, so trusting can be hard. Let's just validate that, right? So we're risking being hurt if we trust somebody, right? And if you've been hurt in the past, it's hard to drop your defenses and be vulnerable because you don't want to go through the hurt again. But at the same time, you need to take a risk in order to get the reward. So if you want the reward of a relationship, at some point, you might have to determine how much you can trust and take a little chance, all right? So anyway, so here's some self-inquiry about mistrust. All right. So one of the reasons for mistrust is because we're fearing connection, right? Maybe connections were hurtful to us or people betrayed us and we're afraid of being vulnerable, right? And trusting someone with my inner self, right? So here's a couple of questions about that. So how open do I want to be in this situation with this person I will be interacting with? And what might be holding me back? Okay, that might be a loaded question. There might be a lot of stuff in there that's holding you back. And what is the worst thing that can happen if I express myself more openly? Okay, great questions to ask yourself if you're at a point in your relationship where you're trying to think about if you should deepen it, if you should reveal a little bit more, right? So exploring what some of the hesitations are. Okay, hard to find a good spot for here. Okay, so let's say, you know, you're hurt or offended by someone's behavior, and that's why you're having a hard time trusting them, right? You had a blowout or multiple blowouts, and it's kind of weighing on you, right? It's kind of like this elephant in the room that's getting in the way of connecting. So how is their behavior influencing my perceptions of them, and in what way? All right. So what is it they're actually doing that's, you know, biasing me or making me feel that they're untrustful? Is there an alternate explanation for their behavior? How might they describe their behavior, right? If someone else were watching the person's behavior, would he or she see it differently than me, right? So I'm questioning, like, if I'm perceiving them as mistrustful or untrustful, I'm not sure what the proper grammar is exactly, but am I seeing this clearly or am I biased in some way? Maybe like I'm not seeing it as clearly as I could, right? If the other person appears tense or even hostile when interacting with me, is it possible it has nothing to do with me, right? So sometimes I mistrust because I'm taking their behavior personally, like it's a threat to me, but maybe it has nothing to do with me. Maybe it's just their own stuff and I could, you know, relax about it a little bit more. All right, so here's some possibilities that we might be able to validate about what else could be going on, right? So instead of feeling like the person's untrustworthy because they don't have my best interests at heart, for example, maybe they have other stuff going on and I can just reinterpret what's happening and see them a little differently. Is it possible the person's struggling with other personal issues and not acting out of malice, right? Has there ever been time maybe when people thought that about us? Like maybe we were in a certain mood about something because something was going on with us and someone might have taken our behavior personally. Sorry, I'm swatting a fly here. Also, is it possible that this other person finds it difficult to regulate emotions or deal with conflict, right? So if they have trouble with emotional regulation, it might come out in a way that is taken out on us, right? But it really has to do with their own issues with emotion dysregulation, right? Maybe they haven't learned enough skills yet to manage this properly, right? Need a little DBT or radically open DBT. Could the behavior I'm seeing be due to past trauma or issues that I don't know about, right? Maybe the person overreacts to certain things because I'm accidentally triggering them. You know, like who knows? Like sometimes we get triggered by all kinds of random stuff. And maybe there's something about our interaction that's triggering the person, but it has to do with something else, like from their past, right? I'm sorry, I think I wrote the wrong word. Is it possible that they sometimes struggle with empathy toward others or may find it hard to appreciate how their behavior impacts others, right? So not everybody has been raised with empathy from their parents or, you know, had people empathize with them. And so therefore they don't always empathize with others. Or if they're in a threat mode, it's very hard to be empathic when you're feeling like you're threatened, right? So that could be something that's going on with the person too. All right. So let's say, you know, after a conflict with the person, you're feeling a little mistrustful because things are just kind of, you know, got a little out of hand. So am I being closed here? Basically, this is talking about. Do I believe the other person must apologize or make amends before I'd be willing to consider how I have contributed to the conflict, right? So in other words, am I so busy blaming them for their role in the conflict that I'm not really looking at my own, right? Maybe I contributed. Like they say, it takes two to tango, right? There's always two sides of a story. Maybe, you know, part of the mistrust has to do with my behavior. Am I tempted to automatically explain or defend myself? If yes or maybe, is it possible that I'm not open to being truly fair-minded, right? Maybe they're trying to give me feedback that I don't like, it's hurting me, and I feel like I can't trust them to be validating. But maybe they have a point, right? Do I believe that further self-examination or work on the relationship is unnecessary because I've already done everything possible, right? Maybe I'm giving up too fast, right? Maybe if I reflected more on myself, did some self-inquiry, or did a little communication and working through, things would get better, right? And we'd rebuild the trust again. Okay, and also finally, sometimes we get so fixed in our negativity about a person that we overlook the good, right? We're so busy feeling threatened, we're so busy feeling mistrustful, we're so focused on their faults, blaming, that we're overlooking the good that actually is there. And if I recognize it, it might shift the way I feel about that person. So am I discounting or minimizing positive things about the person or situation in order to punish them, right? So if I'm thinking about revenge, I'm very closed. If I'm trying to open it up and see the whole picture, see the positives, I'm being more radically open, right? Is it possible I'm not really giving them a chance, right? What might I need to learn? Of course, the big self-inquiry question that covers a lot here, right? So if I try to zoom out and learn more from this situation, maybe my perception of them being mistrustful could change. Right? I think that's it. All right, so we covered quite a bit here, all different stuff about relationships that could maybe help us, you know, build better social relationships. All right, so thanks for listening. Stay tuned for lesson 21. All right, bye guys.